Well, now we'll hear our panel discussion with Shawn Lambert, Ryan Janssen, and Jeff Willis regarding hiring, training, and retaining employees, everything from entry-level driver training, drug testing, and safety. Shawn Lambert is a safety and risk manager at Co-Alliance Cooperative in Avon, Indiana. He has worked in safety for 30 years, the last 19 with Co-Alliance. He grew up on a swine and row crop farm in northern Indiana. He's a graduate of Vincennes University with a degree in ag economics. Ryan Janssen is the EHS director at Key Cooperative in Roland, Iowa. He has over 20 years experience directing environmental health and safety programs in the ag industry, focused on environmental awareness, agronomy and grain operations, operations management, and risk management. He received a master's degree in educational leadership and administration from Iowa State. Jeff Willis is Senior Safety and Security Manager at Perdue AgriBusiness in Salisbury, Maryland. He has been an occupational safety and health professional with over 35 years of experience in regulatory compliance and risk reduction. He worked for over 10 years with ConAgra Red Meats prior to joining Perdue Farms. So with that, I will hand over the discussion to Ryan, Jeff, and Shawn.
Good morning.
Is it? Want to turn on the mics? There you go. All right.
All right. Well, we kind of have the potpourri dish of topics. You know, 1 hour to talk about all of them, so we're going to do the best we can. I'll start off with you, Shawn. The EDL-T program is utilized by all companies, but for Perdue, it's handled by our corporate transportation department, but you have some interest in this, if you want to go ahead and talk about that.
Sure. Most of you probably are aware now, since February, the entry-level driver training rule kicked in, and it's in full force now. We still have a few people that got those last-second CDL permits. We're squeezing those in here in the next few weeks. But then after that, it'll be all entry-level driver training for new folks or people that are looking to upgrade. We wanted to just at least share some of the experiences we've had. There's a lot of options out there for how we can handle it. But the key elements of the training is theory, then field training, which basically happens at your locations or at a truck driving school where they're doing the inspections and backing and turning, things where they're not out on a public road, and then ultimately some behind the wheel training, just to find out how good of a driver they are and get them educated so that they're better and they can pass their CDL exam. As I mentioned, there's a lot of options. So at Co-Alliance, we made a decision to hire a veteran driver within our company to do all of the field and over-the-road type testing, or training, excuse me. That's worked out really good for us. We had an employee that was approximately 60 years old that was at the point he was ready to be out of a propane delivery truck. Prior to his years delivering propane for us, he did a lot of compressed gas transportation all over the United States and over the road trucking. He's like everybody's grandpa. He's extremely patient, which that's what you've got to have if you're going to have somebody do that training for new folks. And he can teach. So if you're looking at candidates at your work within your workforce, you want somebody with good patience, because you don't want to run off these potential candidates, but at the same time, they really need educated. That's what this is about. We've had kids coming directly out of college that have never been in any commercial motor vehicle, all the way through veterans that have had a full-blown Class A CDL, and then they had let it drop here in the last few years. So there's a big difference in how much time it takes to train that young person that's never had any experience in a big truck or even large equipment versus somebody that maybe comes off of a farm or a veteran that just let their CDL expire. So there's those aspects. Again, we decided to do it internally. I've heard ranges. I know there's a technical school right next to our corporate office. They're doing it for $5,000. I've heard as high as $8,000 to get an employee through an ELDT training program. And I've heard some a little bit cheaper than that. About the cheapest I've heard in our region, in Ohio and Indiana, is in that $2,000 to $3,000 range. So there may be cheaper out there, and that's great. I think ultimately what you as safety people or operations, you really want to be able to sleep at night knowing somebody's going to get in a commercial motor vehicle and know what they're doing. I think the diligence to make sure those schools are doing their job, or make sure your internal person is doing your job, is just critical. It's probably a pretty good argument that transportation is as big a risk as we have anybody sitting in this room. And then I guess a couple things I wanted to give, a couple lessons we've learned. We had some folks come in here in just literally the last 2 weeks, a couple of these completely non-experienced employees. And our, we're a full service cooperative, so they came from an agronomy branch, recently hired. They had been folks working at our lot, and they decided the manager wanted to keep them, get them a CDL, and get them down the road. Well, they show up to our ELDT trainer with 0 experience. And you're talking about throwing a wrench in your agenda when we have about 20 people sitting in the stream waiting to go through this program. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge. So we are creating, or we have created a kind of well, it's a form, literally a one-pager that we give to our locations with a certain amount of expectations for that driver to have before he even comes to our own internal ELDT trainer. That is very helpful. You all have qualified people at your locations, just as we do. They need to be out there doing some of the basics on the lot, the field training, the inspections, the basic backing, some of those things. That can all get started, even if it's a Class B vehicle. And we've also determined, our instructor has said, hey, we're getting some of these people with very little experience. We probably don't need to be putting them in a semi for a year or two. Let's get them some Class B experience. That could be a challenge, I guess, depending on your business model at your locations. But again, it goes back to us being able to sleep at night knowing we have somebody that can handle the unit they're getting ready to get into. So I guess those are the key elements, a few things that we've learned. Have a very patient instructor, have one that knows what he's doing, and then also make sure that if there's some things you can do on the front side, some precursor things you can do on the front side, I would highly recommend doing that. It's going to make your instructor's job a little bit easier.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for Perdue, because it's handled by our transportation department, we don't really have anybody in PAB that's required to drive over-the-road rig. But we did stop and think about what we do have, and that's several hundred drivers driving company vehicles. Almost every location has a truck that they run to town with to get parts. We have vehicles that are signed. And internally, we used to run the MVRs, and it got to the point where we have so many drivers that it got to where we could not manage that internally. So we went out about a year and a half ago and started to use a group called Driver Care. And the driver care policy that we put in place kind of really helped us, because number one, it helped us get control of who's driving company vehicles. And we probably have 300 to 400 probably enrolled in the program. There's different levels of the program that you can get based on what your needs are. Initially, we went with the very basic package and realized that we needed to beef that up a little bit. The basic package would be annual review of the policy, annually MVR check, and then of course if there's any training that you want to have those people do. What we found is, though, that we have several people that lose their license quite frequently. A lot of child support issues is what we found. And they're not forthcoming, so when do you want to find out that somebody does not have a driver's license? At the end of the year or at the end of the month? So we went ahead and enrolled, and we run MVRs once a month. The nice thing about it is it feeds off our SAP system, so it goes in there so that when employees go into the system, we can immediately assign them into driver care and location that they're at, and immediately they put in their information, their driver's license, and all the information that it needs. They set up an email and an account. And right off the bat, it requires them to go through the policy and also take a test on the policy. And the policy, that way we know that they caught the key points of the policy. The other thing is that as part of them being able to drive, we have monthly training that we assign, and it's very simple training. It's not anything that you pick. We pick topics, and the training lasts usually about 3 to 10 minutes. And at the end of that, there's a test at the end of that. And we found that the training topics are really very good. It's something that a lot of people talk about. Just this month, they had one on drunk driving. We thought, because it was summertime, we thought it was probably good to roll something out. Not so much that we're drinking, but that people are drinking around us. And they really go to people that have been affected by events where they lost a loved one because of a drunk driver. So it's really hitting home for us. The other thing is, like I said about the MVRs, we've had to call some people on the job and say, look, you can't drive, and have to go send somebody to pick them up because their license is expired. And it's such an up and down, because by the time you get them reinstated and get it back in, they pay their child support, and then they're back online, but then the next month, 2 months later, they're out again. So it was something that we really had to do. The other nice thing about the driver care system is that if there's an incident anywhere, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they call that, and it automatically walks them through the process of reporting the incident. So basically, by morning when you get up, you have a complete incident report about what happened. And also, they take care of the vehicle. They make sure it gets towed. They make sure that there's a rental for the person. So they pretty much take care of everything. It's worked very well for us, and we've been very happy with it. It's just something that, I think a lot of the people, they fought it initially, but like I said, it was something in the end that really paid off for us. And like I said, I can go to bed at night knowing that at least, for the most part, most of our people are driving in compliance. Right?
For us at Key Co-op, being I would say a smaller cooperative in relation to most of the folks in here, we hire as out third party. With that said, though, kind of going back to what Shawn was talking about earlier in terms of getting experience before they go through that ELDT training is really important. We'll spend a lot of time at the locations with the pre-trip. That seems to be a major hang-up for some folks. Probably a major hang-up for those that have a CDL as well, to do those the right way and consistently. So they spend a lot of time with the pre-trip, and then just the practice around the yard. Just literally just staying on the yard, not going out into or on into traffic or on any public roadways or anything, but being able to get, if you're picking up a pile or whatever along those lines, being able to just learn how to turn a semi is a pretty big deal. Learning how to back it up. So keeping those on the yard from that standpoint. And then once we feel that they're ready, we will send them off to a third party to get that ELDT training.
Okay. The next topic we had was drug testing. Shawn, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and kick it off.
Yeah,
pretty much like any standard company, we do pre-employment, randoms, and then also after incidents, and even property damages. Pretty much we put a dollar figure. We can do them at any time on post-incident, but pretty much we started about $500. I think if there's more than 500, then they'll have to do a drug screen. In today's world, because of all the remote locations that we're in, we do use the quick test if the state allows it. Not all states allow the quick test. And I've had my staff in my department trained to go out and administer tests if they're nearby, and also help out with investigations on those property damages. We do train managers, especially the ones that are far out, and they do have the kits so they can do them themselves. But for the most part, and that's non-DOT, you can't do it for DOT. It's just strictly for new hire, and if you got to do post-incident. Then, of course, if you have a positive, then they call the medical department and they deal with them on that, on what the next steps are. I think it's just something that we've always done, and it's just, in today's world, the rate is pretty high on positives. And sometimes when you're hiring people, you'll test 10 to get 2, but you still have to hold your standard and when it comes to drug testing. And just kind of where we're at. Ryan, you got any thoughts on?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that came, and one of the reasons that this is a topic is largely around the legalization of marijuana throughout various states, throughout the United States from that standpoint, and that became an extremely hot topic in our SHEC committee that we had here a few months ago in terms of setting the agenda for this conference here. And so, go back a little bit. If you have any questions, any comments, or any things that you'd like to add along those lines, or any questions that you have for this panel, feel free. This doesn't have to be a formal, we're going to stand up here. This is more of an interactive if we'd go along those lines. But as marijuana and the legalization of marijuana, that's a real big question, especially when we talk about getting and retaining employees. And yeah, the labor pool isn't getting any larger, unfortunately, here in the United States, and we're feeling those shortages. And so, how many in here have a testing policy that doesn't test for marijuana? So there are a few. And so, I mean, that's a significant consideration that needs to be made based upon the states that you live, in addition to the activities that what activities those individuals are doing and performing. Obviously the FMCSA has their own rules around drug use, and again, going back to the ELDT and driver training, and having drivers, we can't have drivers in that are under the influence of a controlled substance or alcohol, but what are we gonna do to get some drivers or other employees? And then I would beg the question is, do you want an active marijuana user at your facility running equipment? I don't know. I don't necessarily have a good answer for that one.
Are you in states, those of you that raised your hand, are you in states that have legalized marijuana that you've removed that testing?
We did. Our company dropped drug testing across the board, only for reasonable suspicion or DOT.
Are you doing new hire? Nope. Strictly reasonable suspicion, or if it's a DOT issue. Anybody else doing that? Few hands popping up, yeah. That's exactly what we're looking at. Indiana hasn't legalized it yet, but we get into states that have, and we're having the discussions right now. We're looking at eliminating everything except pre-employment and reasonable suspicion for non-DOT people, and strictly marijuana, not the other drugs.
Yeah, I think it's one of those that we're still internally dealing with that, but it's gonna take some time. We were going at it pretty strong, and then COVID hit, and that put a lot of those things behind. But, still at the end of the day, we wouldn't allow them to come in and take Valium and drive equipment, so that'd probably be the same with a marijuana type thing. But it's still a long ways to go, and there's a lot of talk about it. I don't think anybody has the answer for it, because it's as each state, and I think this year there'll be additional states that probably join that, freedom of celebration kind of thing, and we'll see where it goes from there.
So what are you doing about COVID testing? What are your policies on if you're not testing for marijuana, what are you doing about COVID testing at this point?
So Jess is throwing us, I don't know if I'd call it a softball, but a challenging question in terms of what are you doing for COVID testing at this point in time if you're not testing for marijuana?
We give them gummies. We do not have mandatory testing. We strictly follow CDC guidelines. And we're actively dealing with about 10 cases. We're a company of about 1,000 employees, but we have 10 cases right now. I just checked with HR this morning. 10 we know about.
And we're doing the same, to that point, 215 full-time employees, 50 to 60 part-timers, are following the CDC guidelines on the return to work related to that.
We've had a pretty aggressive policy on COVID since the beginning, and we don't require testing, but pretty much our policy has been, if you're feeling sick, stay home. Don't come in, call the nurse. And then, of course, they go off and get testing, and they have to show us a negative result before they can return to work. One thing we did when Omicron hit was it was very challenging for us. That's probably the worst part of the COVID that we had was during Omicron. We did pretty well through 20, but a lot of people were working from home. We cut back travel. We did all kinds of things when the Omicron variant hit. It hit us pretty hard in agribusiness and Perdue in general. There was just a big hit. And we were still trying to keep boots on the ground. And one of the things we had done in agribusiness was that we did acquire COVID quick test. And we stocked them in 3 of our parts rooms. And we made it very open to the regional managers and the managers that, hey, if you want to get a few of these for your bag when you travel, in case you wake up not feeling well, you have availability of a test. And this is back when you couldn't get them. You just could not find them. People were standing in line trying to get the quick test. And I think it was one thing that was very positive for the group to show that, we know it's there, we're not ignoring it. And I know my team, even I have some upstairs in my bag right now. It was just something that's very good. So if you're not somewhere and then start to feel ill. And so we were able to acquire those. Now the pressure's on because they expire in December. So I get pressure every day. Hey, you better get those used up. But it was something that we did, but it was never a mandatory testing for us. We just told people stay home. And people, they gladly stayed home. There was not any, sometimes probably more than not. Anything else on COVID? Oh, got a hand over here.
We've not run into the medical marijuana card yet.
I don't think that's something that's really been open for us. I think if we have that, they treat that as a HIPAA for us, and I don't know of any, but it doesn't mean it's not happened for us.
That's the benefit of being in just one state that hasn't legalized it yet.
Guess that's another question.
Has that led you to a reduction in testing, other than non-DOT people?
So essentially, the suppliers still have the same tests. They've got your, 5-panel, 10-panel, whatever the traditional tests are. And if we have suspicion, that's still going to be something that's on the test, and rightfully so. If somebody's high at work, we want to know that. But if it's simply to get the job. If it's new hire training or new hire drug testing, we essentially just rule out THC. Like I said, if somebody fails for THC specifically and they have the card or their prescription to support that, that's something that we take into consideration. But if somebody is involved in a workplace incident, or if there's an injury on the job and we believe they were under the influence, then if they fail for THC, then they're not covered as far as the policy goes, because there's really no way of telling whether they were under the influence while they were on the job whenever the incident occurred, or if they simply just had it in their system. I will say within the poultry industry, at least in Northwest Arkansas, we've got a pretty unique demographic down there. We've got a lot of Marshallese and Burmese in the population down there, and their culture is very unique. So we tend to see a lot of substance abuse issues throughout our industry, at least in that location. Tennessee, Virginia is a little bit different, but the substance abuse is a hot topic for us in Arkansas, specifically because of some of the laws, like I said, with the medical use, and now that I think recreational is going to be on tab for November, so it's kind of a new development over the past few years, but it's definitely something that's been constant conversation.
And I think that's actually a good way of thinking about that, with the medical card to come back positive, because it's no different than any other medication. You know, and it's amazing enough, you've probably seen this yourself, but how many people come back positive because they took their wife's medication? You know, that's still illegal. And so they'll bring in a prescription bottle with their wife's name on it. Well, that's not prescribed to you. And so as long as you come back positive for something that you're prescribed, you work through that. And, you know, most people that are doing it for recreational purposes may or may not have that card.
So I want to do an informal survey. I grew up in cornfields and pig farms, and we're pretty good at these surveys. So how many of you are involved in management of the drug and testing program? Could I really see some hands? And of those, how many of you have eliminated it from the new hire process? How many have totally eliminated? I'm only seeing, okay, so it's a pretty low percentage. Are you guys thinking about it? Are your companies thinking about it? No? Well, I know the employment challenges are an issue. We don't think we're going to eliminate it from new hire, but as far as random, I think we're getting rid of it. It seems to be the trend.
Federal laws. I know they've talked about changing that legally recreational for federally, but in the police world in Missouri, we did medical marijuana cards. We had civilians working for us in the police. One of them got their medical marijuana, but the federal government said no, so that's what we went by. For companies in multiple states, you can just go by federal laws and say, federal government says this is what it is, and that's what we're going to use. As far as testing for it, you can use blood. I was a drug recognition expert, so blood doesn't lie. It'll test for everything. Urine is the least accurate thing you can use, but blood, if you guys want to change it to blood, then you can go in and get a blood test, and that's the most accurate. So just something to think about there too.
It's been an interesting debate. I argue that I'm okay if our marketing department does it, but nobody in the field. We don't want people out in our mills and elevators, but marketing, it might open up some new channels, who knows?
All right, sound like another topic for next year too. Safety training. Ryan, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, I think when we talk about safety, from my perspective, I think it's really important to talk about the philosophy of the leaders around that. And my personal philosophy really plays a part in what we do and who we are as an organization, along with our other senior leadership that's involved with that. And I think part of that comes into play, kind of diving into my personal philosophy a little bit, is the mentality of safety first. As a safety director, you'll never hear me say safety first, because I don't believe it, especially in ag. The get her done mentality is real. It really is. So yesterday, one of the speakers mentioned that our workers are problem solvers. They are. Duct tape and baling wire goes a long ways. On the farm, we don't necessarily want that at our retail facilities, though. But really, from that standpoint, those are the employees that have had the farm experience that are coming to work for us. And so that's where I say, you know, safety first. It isn't, because then it gets into competition with production. It comes into competition with quality, and it comes into to competition with customer service, and safety will lose that battle in ag all day long. It just will. And so when we think safety and the philosophy of the organization, it's the identity that you make for who you are. We're eliminating the word culture, especially when we talk about safety culture. It's not necessarily your safety culture, it's your whole entire organizational culture. Anytime that you put an adjective in front of it, safety, it reminds me of something that I can just take off of the shelf and, okay, now we're gonna work on our safety culture today. Well, how is our safety culture, if we're really truly saying and doing what we wanna do, it should be ingrained in everything that we do. So one of the mantras that I use with all of our new employees is I want you to produce high quality customer service the safest way possible. How do you incorporate safety, quality, customer service, and production into everything that you do? When we get into the safety training aspect of things, is there any OSHA guys in here?
I told there was one yesterday over there, but I didn't see anyone.
All right, that's right.
In Iowa, it's a state plan. So
It's a state plan state, so we're fine. I always ask that question beforehand when I mention this, because I really, from a safety training standpoint, I could honestly care less if that 25-year vet sits through his 26 years of bloodborne pathogen. I say that, but what doesn't he already know about it after sitting in it for the last 25 years? And that's what our focus is, less on sitting in a classroom and making sure that individual can regurgitate the information. Our focus is more on, show me that you can do it. So as a part of our performance evaluation for our employees, we have them do proficiencies, which is demonstrate for me that you can do a lockout tagout. Demonstrate for me that you know how to do a bin entry procedure. Demonstrate for me, and it is a true demonstration, it's basically a skills assessment. Because just sitting in a classroom, and I'll tie into my educational background here just a little bit. Think about the adult learners and think about the individuals that we have that are working in ag, that are out at the dump pits, that are truck drivers for that matter. How much time did they spend sitting in a classroom, and do you suppose they enjoyed it? There's a reason that they are out working manual labor for you. And it wasn't because they enjoyed sitting in a classroom, listen to somebody tell them what to do or how to think. And so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to sit those individuals down, especially as adult learners, and say, okay, you need to learn this. Let's go teach. Let's do on-the-job stuff. Let's go out and if you don't know how to do a lockout tagout, we're going to put you with one of our safety leads with an individual at our locations that is a high safety focus. Yes, they're an operational individual, but they are safety focus minded. We've given them 30-hour training. We've given them some other hands-on social skills training as well. But they're going to demonstrate for that employee, for that hourly employee, how to do a lockout tagout, how to do a hot work permit. A lot of those SIF potential things, Diana, there you go, you're welcome. SIF potential type things like getting into a grain bin. So from our standpoint, when we talk about safety, that's where our focus is. Our focus is on the on-the-job stuff. Our focus is on show me, don't just tell me, but show me. The next level of that is as you develop those individuals, that do have the high proficiency level, then they become the experts. And there isn't any other way to learn something but how then to teach it. Those that can teach really know what they're talking about, and you put them on the spot and you have them teach other employees along the way, then we really start to build what we try to strive for is that camaraderie amongst our staff and that family feel, which we really feel does lead to some retention along those ways as well.
Shawn?
Yeah, we you know, you have to look in the mirror sometimes. In 2013 and 2015, we had explosions in both in Indiana, and one fatality in 2013, and truly the darkest day in our company's history, and the only fatality to this point. We really took a hard look in the mirror, you know, of how we did our training, and much like that, we completely changed our philosophy as far as how we get involved with the employee group. There are check the box training programs, you know, the bloodborne pathogen like you just talked about. I get there are aspects that are important, but every year for 20-something years, there are things we do that check the box, and probably the quicker we all realize that, the better we are off. And then there's the things we can do where we get our people involved, hands-on, and truly are engaged in the training. And we're far from perfect. We get it, but we just had an employee engagement survey in 2021, and safety was rated as the highest area in our entire company. And we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But the employees appreciated smaller groups, intense hands-on. We tried to turn it into a little bit of fun, but productive, and it's worked. It's flat out worked. Now I'll probably get 10 calls on my way home today of different problems that have happened. Not superstitious or anything, but you all get it. I mean, for those of you that are doing it, and if you haven't done it, really take a look at that. Reduce your group size. COVID was an incredible challenge, and we're still going to do some online-based training, but we're not going to give up on we even did some in-person training through the COVID times, and that was challenging. You know, we had to do it outside or in these shops that were open air, whatever we could do, because we see the importance of that hands-on training. Sometimes that's bringing in different folks to help us, you know, how to inspect state police officers, to how to inspect trucks, to our ropes team, how they do that type of training, you name it, rescue, you name it. So I would just highly encourage you to think about that if you're not already doing it.
Yeah, we took a hard look at our training in the last couple of years, and it was something that, I guess it's what level of comfort do you have? You know, I've been doing this for over 35 years, and I can think back 25 years ago, that was your comfort that you had a sheet signed every year by somebody on a training topic. So if OSHA showed up and God forbid they did something, got something cut off, you could say, well, look, I trained him 45 times. And so it was a comfort level. And so we pretty much, instead of taking the things that were the higher risk, the lockouts, the confined space entries and all that, and put more focus on that, we were, and spending more time there like you should, we were, you know, bloodborne pathogen is a perfect example. How many times can you watch the video? The guys could turn the volume down and speak the entire video without even, you know, because they knew it by heart. They watched it every year. It was very scratchy, grainy, 1970s quality. So we took a hard look at what we were doing ourselves. And one of the things we realized is, and actually it was our friends at Safety Made Simple that kind of put the idea in my head a couple years ago, it wasn't so much the topic, it was the time that it took for the supervisors to talk about the topic and teach it. And so they were looking for ways of trying, how can I do this in the shortest window possible? I don't have an hour and a half on each topic. I don't have, you know, you got a great PowerPoint presentation, it's 40 slides, but you know how long that takes when you go through those? So what we did is in the last year, and COVID really helped us here because we had to find a way to change how we do things. And we decided to change the training, refresher training entirely, and we did that. We still do the same orientation. When you come on board, you're not getting anything quick, and depending on what the need is, that could take 6 to 24 hours, depending on what skill set you want those people to have. So what we did is we took our training and all the topics that we felt were important throughout the year and said, okay, we're through quarterly trainings, let's break them down where they can schedule them sometime in that quarter when it's convenient for them. They got 10 weeks to get it done. And we took each thing, and our goal was, okay, here's your bloodborne pathogens. What can we say in one slide, one PowerPoint slide, that we want them to walk away, and these are the key takeaways that they need to know or be refreshed on. And we did that, and it really became a very positive element into the field and allowed them more time. What we saw by giving them more time on training, it increased the training, but it also increased other things that we demand of them: inspections, hazard identifications, behavior-based observations. It increased that. Toolbox talks. It increased that because they had more time to focus on that, not so much, because typically the training session became a safety meeting or it became a toolbox talk, and that's how they did that. So we really took a hard look at that and tried to change what we did. The lockout and the confined space, yeah, you got to spend a little time with that. That's a more detailed, hands-on specialty. You can't describe lockout tagout by showing them a picture of locks and talking about procedures for locking out. You know, you feel a lot better when you're out there working with them on those types of processes that you have. And it's just something that we did overall, and it's been very positive. And we look to do some more. And as time permits, it just takes a lot of time to do that, but we feel very good about the direction we're going. And I think the associates feel better about it. I think they really have. I think they've really been very responsive of it because it's something new. You know, we got to change it up and make it look different. And I've been doing it my whole career. I've had to take the same safety standards that have been out since well, I was a little boy when they all started to come out. And I've had to repackage it every year, make it look like, hey, this is brand new, and it's not. It's been around since 1972. So, you know, so it's just something that we do. All right, now the most important topic, employee retention. If we could figure out what the silver bullet is on that one, we would probably be able to retire. You know, it's something that we hear everywhere. It's not just in our industry, it's every industry. You know, my side life as a hobby, as a firefighter, we can't find paramedics and EMTs to work the ambulances. I mean, it's just harder and harder every day to get staffing. So some of the challenges that we face at Perdue, and that and our president made this kind of a goal for us throughout the year, was personal connections. Are we making personal connections? Are we getting out there and really listening to the people? Are we talking to them? Are we finding out what their concerns are? What we find is that typically most people, you know, you ask somebody, well, we can't find anybody. Nobody wants to work. Okay, well, why did you lose people? They can't tell you that reason, but they can tell you they can't find people. So at Perdue, we've always done it. We always try to do an exit interview when people quit. We've always done it, and it just really become a very key part of what we do now, is you try to get those people for a few minutes. HR does it. It's an exit interview. And you try to ask them questions about, you know, why they're leaving. And believe it or not, we would think most of the time it's pay, but it's usually not pay. It's usually a relationship that's gone bad in the facility with the supervisor. It's the way they feel they were treated. They didn't like the hours. They couldn't get a day off because their kid had a field trip and they wouldn't give them the day off, or it was always something. Doesn't mean that it's right, but it means at least you're listening to try to find out, do we have a problem? And I think, you know, I recently lost one of my safety guys, and he did an exit interview, and there was a couple of things I was sharing with Ryan, and maybe I was with Shawn this morning, was that in his exit interview, he was upset about a couple of things that I had no idea. So I thought, wow, I didn't realize he took it that way. So it really was eye-opening for me that sometimes we speak and we think we say something a certain way and people are taking it that way, but if they don't understand it, they take it wrong. And so I think exit interviews are one way to start. You got to stop the bleed. You got to stop losing people. And, you know, we have a lot of people that leave Perdue because they think the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, but when they get over there, what, I got to mow this grass too? And then they come back. We've had a lot of people like that. They stay gone about 6, 8 months, they come back and they say, whoa, I thought it was nice over there, but man, you won't believe what they asked me to do. So, you know, I think it's always pay. I think if people feel appreciated and they understand that you care, and yesterday during the presentation on the human organizational performance, that's not the first time I've sat through that presentation, and I thought to myself, what better time for industry to start that than now? Because of the fact it gets back, you know, I got a call last night about this that occurred in one of our facilities, and the first thing I hear is somebody screwed up. And it's almost like, don't worry, this guy got hurt, but he didn't follow SOP. And, oh, okay, good, he didn't follow SOP. No, it happened. So I think it's you know, we got to create the environment that people want to come to work to every day, because sometimes pay's not it. Because there's lots of jobs in America that people that pay is lousy. School teachers aren't getting paid near what they deserve, but they come to work because they love it. Police officers aren't getting paid what they should be getting paid, but they come to work because they love what they're called to do it. People will typically work. It's not a pay issue, it's how do I feel when I'm at work? And that's typically what we see, but I think it starts with exit interviews. And then as for the promotional thing, I think we're doing everything everybody else is, commercials, signs, advertisements, ask a friend, you know, Facebook it. I mean, I just think it's something that, you know, it's one of those things. But one thing I learned many years ago, we had a vice president that worked for us, and he used to always, when we'd attend a safety meeting, he would talk, he would always end and ask the question of the group of leaders and say, is Perdue a company that you would want your kids to come work at? Would you want them to come work at your facility right now? And if you could say yes, that means things are probably pretty good. If you said, well, I don't really want my son getting wrapped up in this, why is that? And those are things that we can work on, the things we can change. Shawn?
Yeah, we're making a big push or an initiative. Just listen to our employees, show respect. You know, we all have them. I don't know if it's 90-10 or 80-20, but we have 10 or 20% of our locations that it's like a military camp. You know, that I think the minute the manager gets up, he's got to scream at somebody about something or they did this wrong. And we're really trying to coach those folks to bring it down a level, you know, that there's really not a reason, you know, I'm from Indiana, but so I can relate to Bobby Knight, Iowa folks, you got Fran McCaffrey. Is there really ever a reason to act like that? You know, I mean, if you can't communicate with people and have a professional conversation, and I won't say they're quite that bad. We probably have some people throwing a chair or two, probably. That's a big thing in Indiana, just chucking chairs around. But we just really are pushing that initiative, you know. It doesn't matter what the level of employee, you just listen and you show some respect. People want to be heard, and people like respect. It's pretty simple. You know, it's not this big touchy-feely campaign. It's not. It's truly just the way, you know, our leadership is promoting. We all probably could do a little bit better. You know, you've got the social media, you know, that's just a den of, I don't know what it is. It's bad. But you know, we've had challenges over the years. We all have. And you have employees that maybe need disciplinary action, and you have to address it. But we really are seeing a group of individuals, especially in their 20s and 30s, that don't want any part of discipline. They don't want any part of getting yelled at, or they check out and they're gone. But I believe it doesn't matter how old you are, you really don't. You know, we all can treat each other with a little grace and a little professionalism, and it's a better situation. So we think it's helping. We really do, because now we're starting to, the locations that we thought we have the problems are really standing out now with turnover percentages compared to what we're seeing in other divisions and other departments. So pretty simple concept, but we're seeing results with it, because I think, you know, there's always pay and, you know, quality of equipment, and hours are brutal, you know, in the fall for fall and in the spring also. I don't know how we're working on overcoming some of that, but that's a whole set of challenges.
I think one of the things that I would add to that is the work-life balance is really kind of what you're getting to that with that. And that's a lot of the things that we're hearing is, I don't want to be here 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I've got families, and to that point, the pay is becoming a lot less important. I want to live a life as well. I think one of the things that I would encourage, if you don't have a strong internship program, if you have any proximity to community college, to universities have typically anymore, they have an internship program that is a requirement for graduation. Some community college, they call it a work-study program along those lines. Over the course of the last 8 years, we've hired 20 to 25% of any given year of our interns as full-time staff, and they've come through our internship program through that way. And the best part about it is that internship, they show up in May after they get done with school, and some of them will stay for the course of their internship, which is about a month and a half, and others will stay all summer. But some of them will also come back and work part-time. And a lot of that, again, has to do with our proximity to Iowa State University, and land-grant university, which big ag school, that doesn't hurt us either from that standpoint, but that's really important from that standpoint. If you can get a good, solid internship program built in your organization, that can be your pipeline to getting a lot of quality individuals that way as well. One thing that I would, that's on the recruiting side. I would say on the, I don't know if it's maybe the retaining side. One of the things that we're working on currently and recognizing that we've failed in the past is that first day. And so we're developing a program that's fantastic first day. What does that look like for an employee to show up to work and their login to the time clock actually works? That you knew that they were going to be there that day, that they can actually log into the time clock and actually clock in that day. Because if they can't, what message is that sending? What message is that sending to that individual that, oh, do I really matter that much to this organization? Some of the other positions that have laptops, that have company cell phones, those types of things, having those things ready for them day one. The challenge with some of that becomes is the hiring manager wants them to start a lot sooner before than IT or anybody else can get things arranged in that. And that's understandable. And so part of that challenge becomes is slowing that hiring manager down. Whoa. Yes, he has a pulse. Yes, he's willing to come to work for you, but let's make sure that first day for that individual is a meaningful day, is a fantastic first day for that individual. I think that's really important. You get one chance to make a first impression. You really do. And so make the most of that and really get them started off on the right foot. So some of the things that we were talking about with the retainment standpoint is really show that you as an organization really care about that individual.
I guess it came up when we were on our call about using prisoners and release. Was that you, Shawn, or was it you, Ryan? Did we talk about that? Was we using that, or this is part of the group? Is anybody using people from the jail that are considered okay to leave and work as a workforce? I thought that was a topic that did come up, and I did hear that some folks have had very good success with that. So the gentleman in the back, shaking his head.
Something along those lines too. The state of Iowa has a migrant seasonal farm workers is what they call them in the state. Is anybody else using that program or the federal program that's associated with that in terms of migrant farm workers? Well, I really was expecting to see more hands than that. So. Iowa has a program that allows retailers to utilize that from that standpoint. It's kind of unique in that, I guess.
Which organization do you look into for that?
It's the Iowa Workforce Development utilizes it. It's
a state program.
It's a state program, yeah.
Gotcha.
And the unique part about that state program is, I think, is they're almost a contract worker. So we contacted the state, worked through them to essentially, we were able to set some parameters around and it's a pilot program for us. We've got 215 full-time employees, and we've hired 2 seasonal farm workers through this program. But it's allowed us to get some work, to work through this pilot program really for us. But we were able to set some parameters, and so we contacted the state, the Iowa Workforce Development. We were able to say, okay, we want English-speaking drivers, the guys that can drive, in case we needed them to run some parts, and they were able to accommodate that. One of the requirements for that is we did have to provide housing for them. So part of that program is we rent an apartment. The state came in and inspected that apartment, said yes, that qualifies for us, and those guys can go ahead and move into that residence. So that, again, that's a pilot program for us. I think that's a way that as ag, I think that's something that we're going to have to definitely take a harder look at and get into, especially when if we can get these dang kids off their cell phones and get a shovel in their hand.
Jess, are you hearing anything about any relief on H-2A?
Yeah, from the H-2A standpoint, yeah, that's an issue. I would say that NGFA is not really, is involved in as some of the other groups like NCFC. As far as I know, that there's been legislative efforts, working on some of those changes, but I don't think that's. I mean, from what I read on kind of on the side, not being involved in it I would say as deeply as some of the other groups like NCA, the National Council of Agricultural Employers, and NCFC, I think, and Farm Bureau are all very involved in that. But I don't think anything's going to be happening in that from a legislative standpoint this year.
Right before COVID, we had 17 South Africans come over, and it was outstanding. We'd do it every year if we could, but then COVID, and we got the same message. The second time we applied, we got the same message as that gentleman back there. Retail ag cannot have H-2A. So we had it 1 year, and the next year we were told it's basically who reviews your application at the federal level. We're trying again.
And I think there's a lot of efforts, as you're asking about, to just increase it, right? To just actually,
Just give us some flexibility to use it.
Yeah.
It was excellent because they could speak English. A couple of the guys spoke like 11 languages. They were professionals. They were. One guy was a windmill. He built windmills and worked on high-angle electrical lines. We had a police officer. It was excellent. Excellent program.
Well, if that's an issue that, from a membership standpoint, if that's an issue that I think we should be involved with, and from an advocacy standpoint, please let us know.
Sure.
We have about 5 minutes left, gentlemen, so I don't know if there's anything, any closing or any other comments, questions from the audience.
I'll be around. I'd happy if anybody has any ELDT specific questions. I'd be happy to share at least what we've done. I think it's going successful so far.
We're good. Appreciate everybody's attention. Thank you for the feedback.
Well, great. Well, appreciate it. Ryan and Jeff and Shawn, appreciate a very good discussion. So right now,